Since we have taken the time to learn how to do home family video edits using a kind of a quick and easy format, I thought it would only be appropriate to now kind of switch gears a little bit and show you how to do a typical documentary. And we'll be working on a project, a real life project that I'm actually editing for a client at the moment. I just recently returned from a shoot in Myanmar and am actually this week doing the edit. And so as I piece it together, I thought we would show you, demonstrate the various steps that you would need to go through in a typical edit of a documentary. The first thing that I want to show you in this lesson is how to work with music and narration. If you're new to the documentary scene and you're wondering, well, where am I going to get my music? Where am I going to get my narration and voiceover tracks? There are a number of resources online that you can turn to. One that I like the best for getting voiceovers or narration done is a website called voice123.com. And the reason I like them is because they have linked up with talents all over the world. And so if you need a voice that has a certain language usage or a certain accent that you need as you're putting together your documentary, there's a good chance that they have some talent out there signed up, and you can be able to find exactly what you're needing for your documentary. The other thing that I like about Voice 123 is that you can get auditions from the talent. You can submit a paragraph of your text and give a little description of the type of project that you're working on. And within hours, you will have a number of people auditioning using the actual script that you have submitted. And so you can get a good feel for the tone and the enunciation and the flavor of each of the various talents that submit their audition to you. And you can, in consultation with your client, pick the one that's going to work the best for your project. In my case, I'm very lucky on the project that I'm working on. The client happens to like my voice, and so I'm going to be able to do the narration, and I work cheap for myself, and so that's going to be great. Oh, I should have mentioned how much do you expect to pay at Voice 123. It really varies, and you can ask people to submit quotes, too, for the length of the script that you submit. To get a good talent, you should be budgeting at least $100 for even just a short script, and it's maybe even only a paragraph or two. You should expect to start at $100. If you're looking for a really professional voice, of course, you're going to have to pay more than that. Or if your script is a little longer, a couple pages, you really need to be starting to think about $300, $400, maybe $500 for a couple of pages of narration. Okay, but like I say, I'm lucky. I can do the narration myself on this project, and I just happen to have a very talented daughter and granddaughter who are going to do the voiceovers for the narrations, the interviews I did with the girl that we see pictured here. My granddaughter is going to do her voice, and we also interviewed her mother, and my daughter's going to do that voice. And they have already recorded their narration, and I've recorded my narration, so we're ready to work with that and get it ready for the edit. Now, but what about music? If you are able to create your own music, that would be wonderful. If you're talented in composition and can play some instruments, work on the synthesizer, or play actual real instruments using a recording device that can do several tracks at once, you might be able to put together your own composition for your production. However, there's very few people that can actually do that, and so you're going to have to look elsewhere for music. And music is not necessarily going to come cheap. And so you might be tempted just to go out and, get a piece of music at Amazon.com and throw it on your documentary and just use it without licensing it. But you can get into trouble. You can get your clients into trouble if you don't license the music. And so again, it's good to go to some resources online. If you Googled production music or royalty-free production music, you will find a lot of companies online that will license music to you that you can use in your production. And each company out there, each organization is going to have a little bit different approach as to how they are going to bill you and invoice you for this. What you really want to look for, I think, is royalty-free. And what we mean by that, or what the industry means by that, is you pay for the license once, but then you can use that piece of music in any future productions without having to pay any more royalty fees to the company. And one good company for doing that royalty-free approach is gmpmusic.com. There you can get what's called buyout music. You pay for the CD of music once, and you can use it for a full 99 years in your productions and never have to pay GMP Music again. Unless you decide that you need to use a piece of music for a high-end production, perhaps a theatrical release, national television program, you are going to have to speak to GMP Music again and get a special license for those high-end uses. But as long as you're just putting your video up on the internet, or your client is distributing it on DVD, or even uploading it to a small satellite broadcast situation, they're not going to require any further. And the pricing is very reasonable at GMP Music. Another buyout company that I like is royaltyfreemusic.com. Another organization that I've worked with a lot over the last 20 years. Well, first of all, it was Network Music, and then Network Music got bought out by Killer Tracks. And so now Network Music is just one of their catalogs. As we scroll down, we can see that they have a long list of catalogs of music that you can choose from, and Network Music is just one of them. And so if you know that you're going to be editing a lot of programs for documentary release, broadcast release, internet use, this would be a good option to check out Killer Tracks. They have a huge selection and variety of music that you can choose from, and you can usually work out a very good annual license program with them. I believe right now I'm paying about $2,000 a year to license with them, and that gives me access to hundreds of CDs of music that I can use in my productions. And it's unlimited worldwide broadcast use and internet use. And so it makes it very flexible as to how my project gets distributed. You know, a lot of times when I first work on a project, it could be that the client is only thinking of a DVD release to a small group of people, a group of churches or schools. But then later they might decide, well, you know, it worked out so nice, your video is so nice, we want to put it up on our church satellite network for their distribution. Is it okay if we use your program on the satellite? And if you have that worked out in your license with Killer Tracks, well, you're covered. You don't have to get any extra licensing for the music. Okay, so again, I want to emphasize the importance of making sure that you cover yourself and your client by using only licensed music in your edits. Okay, well, let's start up our program. If you've been following along in our tutorials, you've already seen us start to work with some of this material from Myanmar, Burma. But now we're actually going to sit down and start the edit. Now, this first little bit of working with the narration, when you record a narration in the studio, like I just the other night went over to a sound booth, recorded my narration in a soundproof room so that I wouldn't be having the cars honking their horns like you might be hearing as we record these tutorials. My editing suite is very close to a busy road here in Ho Chi Minh City. And so if you've been hearing the odd siren go by and the horns honking and wondering where on earth I am as I'm recording these tutorials, well, I am in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, and I apologize for any distractions that might be coming through in our tutorials. So when I actually record narration, I have to go to a soundproof room to do that so that we don't have any of those horns. Well, when I get back from the studio and download the card that I used from the device that I used to record the audio, well, that piece of audio, I'm just going to drag and drop it down to our timeline. That piece of audio is going to be coming in mistakes and all. And so what I like to do is put this into a separate sequence that I've created that I call just a scratch sequence. And this is a sequence where you can just work with material to get it ready for your main program, which I have over here. Right now it's blank. I've taken everything out of it. But rather than just drop my audio track into my main program and try and work with it there, I've got a little scratch sequence that we can use to do that. And if you are just kind of jumping in here, not having watched some of our previous tutorials, the way that you can start a brand new sequence, there's a little button over here. It says Create New Sequence. Just click on that and you will create a new sequence. You right-click on it, change the sequence name to Scratch, or we could even call it Narration. And there you have a brand new sequence to be able to use to piece your narration together or edit it to get it ready for your main program. Now, whenever I create a new sequence, it's a good idea to drag and drop that into a folder that you have made in your bin folder to contain all of your sequences. And that way, if you ever need to work with your sequences, delete sequences, or launch sequences that you may have closed, they'll all be able to, you'll be able to find them a lot easier if they're all together in one bin. So if you haven't already created a folder called Sequences, I would recommend at this point to create a folder called Sequences that you can use to hold all of your sequences. Okay, so we've got this clean narration track to work with. Before you drag and drop your narration onto your timeline, let's just make sure over here that our channels are going to two separate tracks. You'll remember that if you right-click on this, you could have both channels going to just one track by choosing that. But when you're working with audio narration tracks, depending on who recorded them and how they recorded them, what device they used to record it, this narration might be coming in a variety of different ways. And a lot of times it will be easier to work with if you separate the two channels of audio into two different tracks. So let's click down here again. And now we see that our two tracks of audio that is coming in from our device, or our narration track that might be sent to us by voice123.com, the talent might have sent it to you and you're just dropping it on to be able to work with it, then it's better to have this separated. So now let's go to our narration folder, find our clip, and we can just drag and drop it down to, you can point to any one of these tracks really, but it's better to point it to track 1 and they'll pop on. And now in order to see the waveform of this audio, let's open up our tracks, and you can do that just by clicking on the little arrow here and click on the other arrow for track 2. And as we collapse our timeline here and take a look at the waveform, we see that the way I recorded it in the studio, all of the audio went to one track. And so we could completely delete the second track of audio and be fine. Now, in order to delete the second track without deleting the first, we need to just right-click on that, choose Link Group, and select the option Ungroup. Now these two tracks of audio have been separated, and we can delete the bottom one and not affect the top track at all. Okay, and when I'm working with audio, I like to see the waveform a lot better, and so I'm going to make this track a lot bigger, and you can do that just by getting your mouse in between the top part of track 1 and the double line there, and click down on your left mouse button and start dragging your mouse up, and you can make your audio track quite large. And to see the waveform just a little better, you might want to expand your track out a little bit. I've got that on a keyboard shortcut, so that's what makes it so easy. And if you don't have that on a keyboard shortcut, you can use the slider button up here to subtract or contract and expand your timeline. Okay, but I like to see it spread out a little bit so I can visually see where I should make my cuts as I edit this piece together. I want to take out all of the mistakes that I made in the studio before I bring it over to my main program. Now, one other thing that we might want to notice here as we work with this narration track is to see how it was panned in the studio. And so just play a little bit of it, just hit your space bar, and that'll start playing it. There's several things we notice. One is that it looks like it was recorded a little low, and it was only panned to the right channel. So even before we start editing our clip together, we want to work with the volume and work with the pan. Let's do the pan first. And the way to adjust your pan is to go over here. You'll notice a little button that says volume pan over here. Right now it's grayed out. What we want to do is click on this and toggle through the various options you have here. The first option that will show up is volume. Well, since we want to work with the pan, let's click again, and here we see now the option to work with our pan. And when you see pan lit up there, you'll know that you can now make adjustments to the pan of your audio. So now what you want to do is look for a little blue line. And it may be a little bit difficult to see right at first, the first time you're working with this, because it's butted right up against another solid line that is also kind of blue. But here it is up here. Sometimes it will actually be in a different location depending on how your audio is recorded. In this particular case, it's panned right up to the top there, panned to one side or panned to one channel. So what I want to do first of all is press down on my Alt key on my keyboard so that I will be able to affect the whole track with one sweep. When I point to the little blue line now, I'm going to be able to slide the whole clip, the whole audio recording with one sweep as I drag my mouse up and down. If I didn't have my Alt key down, you'll notice that when I point to the blue line, I'm going to be making what's called a little node there. And if I was to then drag that down, I would only be dragging that portion down. So let's undo that and be sure to hold down your Alt key and then drag. And what we want to do is probably place it right in the middle there. And that should pan the audio equally both to the right and to the left. Let's play a little bit of it again. And now as we look at our audio mixer here, we see that it is now definitely going to both the right and left channels. And by the way, if you're not sure how to launch this mixer here, this little mixer window, it's the little button right here on the top of your timeline, audio mixer. Okay, but ideally what we want to be seeing is our audio peaking at -12. So we see that we probably didn't have our audio quite loud enough when we were recording it in the studio. So we want to manipulate our audio. And so let's go over to our button again and change it from pan, and it goes to the grayed out, or where nothing is selected. So let's hit it again. Let's, with our mouse, click on it again, and now we see the volume lit up, and that will allow us to adjust or manipulate the volume level. Again, we want to hold down our Alt key before we point to that amber line, and we want to just take it right up to the top, and you'll notice the little white window down there. We are able to add to our volume a full 12 dB gain. So let's see if that's enough. Let's play a little bit of our audio and watch our levels over here.
Her name, when translated, means jungle flower.
Well, as we watch this, the majority of the audio is still not peaking at 12, and so it's still a little bit low. So we need to actually add some more gain, and how we can do that is to go over to the Effect palette and go under Audio Filters and look for a filter called Pan, Pot, and Balance, and drag that right down to your timeline and let your mouse go. And now you will have added, over here in the Information palette, you can see that you've added a filter to this clip called Pan, Pot, and Balance. Now if we want to work with the Pan, Pot, and Balance filter, we need to double click on it in the information window here. So if you don't have this information window showing up the way I have it here in your Windows configuration, you might have it showing up in a tab here. And usually when you drop a filter or a video effect on a piece of media, Edius will automatically switch you from the Effect palette over to the Information palette. And so if you've got it showing up here, there's a good chance that your Information palette is now showing up in your window by default. If you would like to see this Information palette setup like what I have here, you can break any palette away from the main palette window and create your own new window. Like right now, as a sample, we're taking the source browser palette and making a new window, and we can position that wherever we like on our screen. And I'll just put that back. And that's what I've done here. I've broken out this window away from the main palette and dropped it into place here so that I can work with the filters and effects, the video transitions, all of the cool tools that Edius has will now be very easily accessible as they show up in the information palette window that I've created here. Okay, so to work with the pan, pot, and balance, we just need to double click on that, and that'll open up a little window that we can use to adjust the volume, or even the pan here we could adjust. But in this case, we just want to raise the volume up on both sides by maybe just another, say, 4 dB gain. That should be adequate. Make sure they're about the same, and then hit OK. And now, as we watch our levels,
Her name, when translated, means jungle flower.
and that's about what we're looking for. So now our next step would be to edit out some mistakes. And if you watched our tutorials on how to do home quick and easy edits of home videos, that might be the best way to approach cutting up a narration track. And so to do that, we would use the settings over here of the insert edit and making sure our ripple mode is on, and using the same approach that we used when we did our quick and easy edits of home videos. We're going to chop up this little piece of narration.
Pa Wah is 13 years old.
I think as I remember as I did this that I didn't like the very first take that I did, and so I'm going to just, by knowing that, I'm just going to slip across, grab hold of my timeline button, and go to the next place where I started the narration over again.
Pa Wah is 13 years old.
So there's several ways we could do this. We could grab hold of the end and just trim it back, or probably a lot easier is to use the method that we learned for our home videos. Just use the C key to cut that, select it, and hit the delete key, and now we've gotten rid of that first section.
Pa Wah is 13 years old and lives in a remote village in the state of Karen.
Well, as I listened through this little first section, I think it's actually all good. There's no mistakes beyond that little first section that we had to delete. So I'm going to cut this part out. And what I'm going to do is actually export this material as the first section of the script. I know that I've broken up the script between narration and voiceover, the interviews, and this is actually the first section of the script. And so we're going to make a separate audio clip out of that. And so we're going to set our in points at the beginning, set our out points at the end, hit the F11 key, and the F11 gives us the export options that are available. We want to go down to audio, and from the options that are available here, I like the PMC wave file the best for this type of thing. And so selecting the PMC wave, and hit the export, and we'll call it narration. And that will have shown up in whatever bin that was open. Even if you were in a different tab, that's going to show up by default in the bin that you are currently selected. Mine just happened to be already selected at narration, but if you were up in another folder somewhere, that narration clip is going to show up at the bottom of whatever folder you have clicked on and have open. So at this point, if it's showing up in some other folder than your narration folder, you might want to, at this point, drag and drop that into a folder called narration. If you don't already have a folder called narration, now's the time to make that. And you can make new folders, remember, just by right-clicking on the top one and select new folder. And that way you'll create a folder called narration. Okay, well, let's go after the voiceovers. The audio clip that I got from my daughter and granddaughter, they called it narration. So that's why it's showing up like that. Now, as we look at their two tracks, we see that they must have had two mics connected to their device, and one, it looks like, is a lot closer to the person who's speaking than the other one. If we were to make these the same level, we would see that one of them is definitely showing a much better recording of the audio than the other. We could listen to both of them just to confirm that. Well, let's shut off or mute the track, the bottom, the second track here, and listen to the first track. Let's maybe bump up the audio on that as well. Looks like it could use a little help.
If I pass the exams at my school here, I want to go on to study at high school for more education.
Now, if we were to listen to the same audio recording on the other track, let's mute the top track and just listen to the bottom one. We see that it's picking up the audio, but it's obviously not close to the talent's mouth, and so we're getting a very low end recording, low quality recording of it. And so we don't want that part to enter into our mix at all. So to avoid any chance that this poor quality recording of the other channel is going to end up in our project, let's get rid of it altogether. And we can do that the same way as we did a minute ago on my narration. We can, let's unmute that track. We can right click on either one and choose to link, group, and then ungroup. And now we can get rid of the other channel that is of lower quality. Now all we're going to be working with is the mic that was right close to the talent's mouth.
If I pass the exams at my school here, I want to go on to...
But we see that it is still showing up only panned to one channel. And it's always good to be sure that narration or that everything is really panned to both channels. And so let's do that. Let's click and change this over to pan and take a hold of our blue line there with the Alt key held down and bring that right down to the middle. And now as we watch our audio mixer here, we can see that both channels are showing up at the same level.
If I pass the exams at my school here, I want to go on to study at high school for more education. And if I am able, I would like to then go...
And as we look at this, we can see that it's still not quite peaking at -12. And so we're going to toggle back over to volume over here and pump that up just a little bit more. Let's open up our track so it's completely wide open again. Another way of doing this, if you find it a little difficult to use this method of stretching it out, you can right-click anywhere here and choose height and go and select high or 5. And that'll open it up to the absolute maximum a track can be opened up or expanded. And then with our Alt key held down, let's bump this up just a little bit more so it's going to start peaking at -12.
If I pass the exams at my school here, I want to go on to study at high school for more education.
Okay, so that's a lot better. Maybe a little bit too much. Let's back it off just a little bit. Okay, and so now let's chop this up. The first voiceover track, I think starts here.
Dozen is my best friend. We do everything together. If I ever have a problem, I know I can talk it over with her. She also shares her problems with me.
Okay, well, this looks like a pretty good take here. Let's hit the C key. Now, because we know that there are other parts that she recorded kind of out of sequence that we're going to need later,
I pass the exams at my...
we're not going to actually get rid of that section. We're not going to delete it, but let's separate it so that it's a little less confusing and start this again. Now we notice just the mic is picking up just a little bit of noise there as she opens her mouth. We don't need that, so we can trim that back. Just grab a hold of the end there and slide your mouse to the left, and that will get rid of that. We could have also done that with our C key and deleted the bad part.
Dozen is my best friend. We do everything together. If I ever have a problem, I know I can talk it over with her.
Okay, so that's where we need to make another cut and go searching for the good take of the script that follows.
She also shares her problems with me. But now that you're learning...
Okay, I think that was the take that I liked the best. So we want to just grab that little snippet.
She shares her problem...
Right here, I believe, is where we start. So let's put hit our C key to put our mark there.
She also shares her problems with me.
Okay. and that's the section that I liked. So I'm going to hit the C key again, and now I can just grab a hold of that little bit and drag it with my mouse and pop it into place right next to the other part of the statement.
Talk it over with her. She also shares her problems with me.
Okay, but that's not quite the whole statement, so we need to find that other ending part.
Together, we can help each other find a solution. It's good to have a friend like Dozen.
That's pretty good right there. So we can place our timeline cursor or playhead right where we want. Hit the C key. Well, first of all, make sure your clip is selected, or at least have your A track where the focus is on the A track. And then even if your track is not lit up there or selected, you can just still hit the C key, and Edius will know what track you're wanting to make the cut on when you hit the C key.
Together, we can help each other find a solution. It's good to have a friend like Dozen.
Okay, and drag and drop that piece over. And again, we'll put our in and outs and export that. Should have pointed out last time, just in case you've skipped over some of our previous tutorials, when you go to export with the F11 key and you come up with this dialog box and you're exporting, just make sure that you do have this box checked, the export between in and out. Otherwise, Edius will export the whole length of your sequence that's open. So once again, we'll go down to Audio and select PMC Wave, hit the Export button, and give it a name, VO for VoiceOver, Part 1. Okay, well, that gives you a pretty good idea of how to work with your narration track. In our next tutorial, we'll start piecing our music and narration together to start assembling our edit.